Today we are going to be graphing linear equations using 3 points. So the best way to do this is to set up a chart. The chart we're going to set up looks like this. We've got our x value, and we're going to select some x values. These are also called inputs. So we're going to input some numbers in for x, and then we're going to use the rule that y equals. Here the rule is negative 2x plus 3. And then once we use that rule, we're going to get what we call outputs, or y values. So we're going to be selective. Here we're going to pick some points, maybe like a negative point, maybe like -1. And then 0 is always a great point to pick. And we'll see why in just a moment. And 1 also is a good number to pick as well. So we go ahead and take these numbers here that x equals and substitute them in place of the x. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down -2 times, but instead of x, we're going to input that number x is. Here x is -1. And then we just bring down that plus 3, and we do the work. So -2, or -2 times by -1 makes a +2, and then 2 plus 3 gives me 5. So my first point is -1, 5. So what I'm going to do is go over 1 space to the left, and then up 5 spaces. So I go all the way up to here, and we can put a dot there. And then we do the next one. So again, it's -2 times by, and then instead of the x again, going to put the value that x is, that we're assigning x. In this case it's 0. And then we go ahead and then add the 3 and then do the work. Well, -2 times by 0 makes 0. 0 plus 3 gives me 3. So there's my point, 0, 3. So I'm going to go over 0 but up 3 spaces and then put the dot there. And we got another chance here. -2 times by, but in place of x, we're putting the value that x is. And x in this case is 1. So we go ahead and put that number in there, and we do the work. So -2 times by 1 plus 3. Do the math, and we get -2 plus 3. Here we have opposite signs, so we're going to subtract those two numbers. More positives than negatives, so it makes 1. So we go over 1 space and up 1 space. We've got our answer. So now we've got 3 points. We can go ahead and draw the line. So we'll go ahead and draw the line through those points and extend it down a little ways. Put some arrows at the end showing that it goes on forever. Down and to the left, or down to the right and up to the left. There it is. Well, taking a look at the next one, we've got this time y equals 3 minus x. So we'll set up the same sort of chart. We've got our x values, those are our inputs. And then we've also got the rule. The rule is 3 minus x. And then we've got our outputs, our y values. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take those inputs, and we got to pick anything we want. Now again, I try to pick maybe like at least a negative number. 0 is always a great number, and 1 as well. So I usually try to pick small numbers. Kind of depends on the type of equation that I have for the numbers that I pick. But typically it's going to be -1, 0, and 1. So this time, I'm going to go ahead and substitute that first one, -1, in for x. Now remember, this minus sign here, think of it as like the opposite of x. And you'll see why once I put that -1 here, because it's 3 minus -1. Well, remember that rule back in 6th grade where we had to subtract and add negatives? In this case, subtract negatives. We add the opposite. And so really, I'm adding those two numbers, and I end up with 4. So the next one, again, it's kind of nice. 3 plus, and then again, oops, not plus this time, but negative. So let me erase that minus sign, or plus sign. Get the right sign in here. I saw this sign, I went with a plus, but I have to go back up to the rule. 3 minus is what I should write down. So 3 minus, and then I go ahead and put in my new number that x is, my new input, which is 0. Well, 3 minus 0, that just gives me 0, or 3. So that's the number that my output is. And then I go ahead and do the next one. I put in a 3 minus, but then I take my input and I put that into the rule. And when I go and do that work, 3 minus 1, that just gives me 2. So now I've got all the numbers I need to go ahead and graph this. So I'll graph them one at a time. Negative 1, 4 means I'm going to go over 1 space to the left and up 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then do that with the next one, 0, 3. I'm going to go over 0, but then just up 3 spaces. I put the dot there. 1, 2 means I'm going to go over 1 space to the right and then up 2. And I put the dot right there. And then from there I can draw the line. So the line extends down to the right and put some arrows at the end. Or I can think of it going up to the left. So those are 2 examples. Let's take a look at another one. So far both of these lines have been going downhill from left to right. This next one's going to be a little different. So let's see what makes it different. Well, we got to do it again. We're going to pick some x values. Write the rule here, 3x minus 2. And then we get to come up with our outputs, which are the y values. So we'll pick the same numbers again. It works out well. Negative 1, 0, and 1. And I'll substitute those numbers in place of x. So you're just rewriting the coefficient, that 3, and then times by whatever number we have here. So negative 1 in this case. And we go ahead and put in a minus 2, and then we do the work. So 3 times negative 1 makes negative 3 minus 2. Remember, through negative 3 minus 2, same thing as plus negative. And so that means I add the 2 numbers, so that's how I'm getting negative 5. So we take a look at the next one. 3 times by, and then I have 0 this time to input. And then I just bring down my constant that I'm subtracting, minus 2. And do the work here. 3 times 0 just makes 0. 0 minus 2 gives me negative 2. Well, from there I've got the last point. Same sort of thing. 3 times, and I put in my x value. So x value is 1. And then just bring down that minus 2. So minus 2. Let me erase that part there. So minus 2. And then you do the work. 3 times 1 makes 3. 3 minus 2 just gives me 1. So now I've got all my points. I can go ahead and graph my line. So I'm going 1 space to the left, negative 1. That's where this number comes from. And then this time I go down 5 spaces. So 1 to the left from the origin, down 5. And then put the dot. 0, negative 2 is over 0, and then just down 2. And the last one, 1, 1, over 1 to the right, up 1. Then draw the line. And extend it past the points. Arrows at the end. There it is. Well, one more problem. And this one, I guess before I get onto that one, look at the difference between this line. This line's going uphill from left to right. As the x values are getting bigger, the y values are getting bigger. Here, if we look at these, the y values are getting smaller as my x values get bigger. These two are called negative slopes. They're decreasing lines. This is called a positive slope because it's an increasing line. Both values increase. Here, just one value increases. Well, last one here. We've got this x. Those are our inputs. We've got, this time the rule is just the opposite of x. So not much to do there. And then we've got our outputs y. So we'll pick the same numbers, negative 1, 0, and 1. And this time, every time we do this, we're going to end up taking the opposite. So let's see what we end up coming up with. So taking a look at this first one, we've got the opposite. X is negative 1. We want the opposite of negative 1. And then over here, we want the opposite of 0. Well, there is no negative 0. Over here, we want the opposite of 1. So we just put in a 1. And let's see what happens when we go ahead and take those opposites. Here, when we take an opposite, minus negative makes plus positive. So it makes just 1. Well, there is no opposite of 0, just makes 0. And the opposite of 1 just makes negative 1. So now that we've got our points, we just plot them. So negative 1, 1. So we go over 1 to the left and then up 1. Now can you guess which type of line this is? Is it going to go downhill from left to right? Or is it going to end up going uphill from left to right? Let's see. 0, 0 is the next point. So it goes right there. So right away that tells me it's a decreasing line. See, it's going down this way. Last one is 1 comma negative 1. Over 1 and then down 1. So it goes right there. And then from there I can draw that line right through those points. Extend it at both ends, saying that it goes on forever in both directions. So that's graphing lines using 3 points. And tomorrow we're going to graph lines using x and y intercepts.